Counter-Narrative News bring you daily news today on Tuesday, 21st of February 2023. President of USA, Biden, has gone to Kyiv in Ukraine to meet his counterpart there, Volodymyr Zelensky. Obviously, this is timed for the one-year anniversary for the onset of the Russian-initiated colonial war of occupation, collective punishment, and annexation. And while Biden postures as a great senior partner of Zelensky in Kiev, at the same time, despite Vladimir Putin's claims and assertions that he is the savior of the quote-unquote ethnic Russian people of East Ukraine, Putin has failed to go to the front line or anywhere in East Ukraine since the outset of his initiated conflict there against his neighbor Ukraine. Actually, there has been no outpourings of any support to the Russian military action in Ukraine by the so-called Russian-oriented or ethnic Russian communities in the east of Ukraine. Probably around a third of them would think the whole thing is quite disgusting and a horrible bloody mess, of which it literally is. Perhaps a third are in some kind of sympathy and support of Putin's actions, and perhaps a third are somewhere in between all of that. But zooming out, it seems a very interesting moment here, because Zelensky has been traipsing around Western capitals begging for military aircraft, of which he has had no assurances and promises. And what he has had is some level of military support from leading Western nations that is going to be delivered in about 3 to 6 months anyway, which leaves the gap between now and receiving that war materiel that allows Vladimir Putin and the Russian military to conduct what many are predicting is an offensive by the Russians any moment now in Ukraine. Is it the case that perhaps that Ukraine is not seen by the West as a whole white European nation, and that it will utilize Ukraine to continue an entrapment strategy against its emerging global competitor, albeit in the same kind of colonial capitalist approach and framework that is Russia? It could be. Could it be also that somehow leading Western states, particularly London and Washington, have an eye towards developing a war path to pressure and contain and to control the Chinese state as another global competitor in their capitalist colonial competition globally? That could also be the case. Whatever the case may be, something is about to shift very soon in relation to this conflict. Going over to a connected story, there has been a quote-unquote Rage Against the War Machine protest in Washington, D.C. in recent days. This has been organized by a strange and sordid array of leftists, liberals, and the far-right and neo-Nazis. It includes just avowed open neo-Nazis in the form of several leading figures around that, even connected to the Unite the Right rally of neo-Nazis in Charlottesville some years ago. This is all indicative of the very toxic type of politics that has developed in the last several years around what many people have called the new fascism and the new far-right global revolution. Many leftist forces who have been in the Russian or Chinese camp are now under the leadership of right-wing or far-right or openly neo-Nazi forces, organizations, global industries, global soft power and media infrastructure, etc. It's really important that people keep true to principles of liberating humanity, which is against white supremacy, for black liberation, for the liberation of women from their oppression, and for the emancipation of the global working class, which is disproportionately deposited in black and brown skin in the global south. Going over to some news in Britain, a well-known media personality who advocates against white supremacy and the rights of black people and people in general against racism, Dr. Shola Mos-Shobgbamimu, has received a handwritten and hand-delivered death threat letter from a banned Nazi organization in Britain called National Action. It's a disgusting letter full of just horrible racist diatribe in which they threaten the lives of Dr. Shola and her family by means of violence, explicitly with the threat of knives and guns. It's been exposed also recently that the British police themselves have been infiltrated by National Action that led to one particular police officer being expelled and charged and imprisoned as a result. But it also points to a wider strategy by the British state in line with the far-right Tory government and regime here to keep communities intimidated and terrorized, so the grassroots at the point of the working class, especially the most oppressed sections of the black and brown working class, do not even think about organizing and resisting and fight back. And that's quite the point. The point in this strategy of intimidation and racist terror is to meet it with a greater force of liberating black-led resistance and anti-fascist and anti-resistance. However, it is the case that the far-right Tory state terror and its cousins and offsprings in things like National Action and other neo-Nazi and far-right violent movements are achieving very much that intimidation on a mass level at the grassroots. That's why we are seeing no radicalization of young people towards radical socialist and black liberation ideas. There's just a very profound and massive absence of that. And as we are going through this history, it will be the most militant, the most courageous and fearless elements within the people's resistance that will come to the fore. It may be very small in numbers, but such is the science of oppression and resistance that they will come to the fore. And we finish off with the last item here, and very much fitting in this regard, on this day, that's 21st of February in 1965, one of the greatest revolutionary figures on the planet and radically oriented black grassroots figures of the black power movement and the most radical elements and the radical wing of the civil rights movement amongst black people and African American people, or the African diaspora in the USA, Malcolm X, was martyred. Time doesn't permit to go into the important contribution of this man to the global revolution against racism and capitalism, but just to make one important point, Malcolm X himself comes from a family of black liberators and black fighters. His father was in Marcus Garvey's UNIA movement, which was arguably one of the biggest Pan-Africanist movements there's ever been. His mother was from the Caribbean. His immediate siblings and cousins were also involved in black resistance and black radical organizations. So it was no accident that Malcolm X ends up in the Nation of Islam. However, because of the revolutionary movements of the time that were leading and defining popular culture and communities, Malcolm X continuously shifted towards more radical, and one can argue more radical leftist frameworks, moving away from the conservative, relatively right-wing politics of the Nation of Islam that were not deposited at the grassroots in struggle. This very much frustrated Malcolm X, so he gravitated more towards the Cuban revolutionaries, for example, for Abdurrahman Babu, the leading Pan-Africanist revolutionary from Zanzibar, of Kwame Nkrumah, of Fidel Castro, of the Algerian FLN revolutionaries, and so on and so forth. Of course, the resistance in Congo, the loyalists of Patrice Lumumba there, of the Vietnamese revolutionaries, of Mao and the Chinese revolutionaries standing up for Africa and Asia and the general global south. Malcolm X remains a very leading figure for us to take inspiration and courage from, and to inform our struggles going forward. Thank you. That was Counter Narrative News with Daily News. Please do continue to support us by encouraging your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter at @counter_CNN, and please do like this video and share and comment. All the best.